James chapter 1 verse 6 to 8. James chapter 1 verse 6 to 8.
For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord.
Verse 8.
A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways.
So when you see a man view God as good and evil, it will reflect in that person's character. You will be an unstable person. But when you know that your father is always good and kind and always blessing, it reflects in your character. Can somebody shout very loud, I am just like my father? Can I hear you say it one more time? Now, this morning, like I said, we are looking at this God who has one character, onedizo. It means God does not insult, he does not reproach, he does not find fault, and he doesn't qualify. Look at what God says in Hebrews chapter 8 verse 12. Hebrews chapter 8 verse number 12. Hebrews, not James. Hebrews 8:12, not Hebrews 8:1. Who is on computer? Hebrews 8:12.
For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more.
I will be merciful to their unrighteousness. He didn't say they will stop being unrighteous. He said they will be unrighteous, but my disposition to their unrighteousness will be mercy. I will be merciful to their unrighteousness. Obviously, that shows us that God did not institute again the Old Testament. And you know what I'm talking about in the context of this teaching. God will not do something that is not perfect. The Old Testament was given because people refused to believe the gospel. God doesn't look for faults. And we've established that in the course of this teaching. Question: did they have faults in the book of Hebrews? Did they have faults? Yes, they did. But Jesus didn't consider their faults. God didn't initiate the Old Testament because he is called the author and the finisher of faith. But the law is not of faith. So again, for the sake of those joining us for the first time, when we say the Old Testament, we're talking about the law of Moses. The law of Moses is predicated on what man can do to qualify for God, and man can never qualify. The New Testament is a relationship with God that is predicated on what Christ has done on behalf of man that has pleased God. That's the New Testament. So again, Old Testament was not initiated by God because God does not have two sides. God has only one side. He is single-minded. He has single personality and single character. God is such revealed to us that you can predict him. You can predict what God will do and what God will not do because he has so revealed himself to us in his son, Jesus Christ. Now, he talked about Moses in Hebrews chapter 11. And we saw in the first service how that, the sprinkling of blood by them that crossed the Red Sea, there was nothing mentioned again till the walls of Jericho fell down. In other words, the 40 years the law was given was never called faith. It was 40 years of unbelief in the wilderness. And those 40 years was not mentioned in the book of Hebrews. The only place they were mentioned is in chapter 3 and chapter 4 to chapter 9 of Hebrews. The 40 years were called years of unbelief, where the people could not enter because of unbelief. He mentioned how the law was given when the temple was built. But when the journey of faith was going to be taught, that part was not included. The 40 years in Kadesh Barnea was totally out of being included in the journey of faith. So again, God didn't give the law. That's why the law is called the law of Moses. Jesus is the author and finisher of faith. The law was to find fault, but God never finds fault. So God couldn't have been behind the law that finds fault. Brother Paul summarized the law this way. Romans chapter 3 verse 19. Look at the way Brother Paul summarizes the law of Moses.
Now we know that what things soever the law saith, it saith to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God.
Because the law is a fault finder, its mission is to stop every mouth and make everybody guilty before God. The law is to make people guilty. Yet God's blessedness that a man has righteousness imputed without works. So that is not contradictory in God, because the law is not of God, faith is of God. In Romans chapter 4, Brother Paul was speaking to the church in Rome. He said, what have we said that Abraham has found? Well, Abraham has found righteousness without works. What did the law find? The law has found sin. What did God find? God found faith. God found faith. The law found sin. Abraham found righteousness without works. God found faith. The law finds sin. The people who had faith, did they have sin in the Old Testament? The people that had faith, did they have sin? They had sin, but they were not viewed through the lenses of sin. They were viewed through the lenses of faith. Are we teaching here? But did God find sin? Did the people have sin? Did God find sin? He never found sin. What was God looking for? Faith in the promise. And Abraham had that faith, so it was credited righteous. Isaac, Jacob, righteous. Joseph believed, righteous. Abel believed, righteous. Rahab believed, righteous. Samson believed, righteous. So what God was looking for was faith. He wasn't looking for their shortcomings. They had shortcomings, but that was not God's focus. God's focus was faith in what Christ will do that pays for sins. So we're examining God revealed in Christ. Our God is revealed in Christ. So if it is not of God, we should be able to easily know. We said if it is not Jesus, it is not God. Can somebody say if it is not Jesus, it is not God?